Hey everyone, it's David K. Richards here with Intuitive Leader Within, and I'm following up on my last Facebook Live with some follow-ups. I got a lot of questions, a lot of things people wanted me to share more about. So here's the deal. I'm gonna start with some story time, okay? Everybody loves a story. So I was flying a year and a half ago to Indianapolis, and I was on the airplane for like 3 hours to, I can't remember the connecting flight, but I was on the plane for a few hours and I had a connecting flight. It was like 2.5 hours, 2 hours each flight. So I go on one flight, sit next to this UFC fighter. I get up in the air, 30,000 feet, and I start to write about what I thought I might be doing in the future. And no joke, I just started writing. It was like it just started coming through me. Something about being 30,000 feet in the air, it's like it just all comes through me. So I started writing it down, and it all just came to me around what I talked about in the last video, which is this shift in the order and how we have to reimagine our schools and our institutions and how we lead. And so at that moment, I was like really jazzed. You know, you start, when your soul's into what you're supposed to be doing, things are good, like it's playful, you're just excited. So I'm like super excited, and all I want to do is like keep writing in my notebook. Get on the next flight, sit next to this woman who's like super friendly. I have my headphones on. It's like very clear I don't want to talk to her. And she is really chatty and seems really nice. And so we start chatting, and she tells me that she runs this innovative business, and she cashed out, and now she's like 40 years old and lives in Colorado and has this great life. And I'm like, cool. So we start chatting more and more, and we start talking about education. She has a 4-year-old. And all of a sudden, this like the frequency's like really high. We're up in the air. I'm like, wow, I didn't want to talk to this woman. Now I'm super jazzed and pumped to be understanding more. She's like, also, I'm a business coach, and why don't I just talk to you? It seems like you have a lot of ideas. Like, tell me about this. So I start telling her. I didn't tell her that I just had this idea 20 minutes before I met her, and it just came through me on the previous airplane. But I just started telling her about the idea, and she was super excited, and she gave me tons of advice, and I wrote it all down. And when I got into Indianapolis for this conference, I was like, I went for dinner, and I was like, I'm not even gonna try and reach out to my friends because I need to process what just happened. So I wrote it all down, and I put that up on my wall for the last year and a half, because that was when the universe delivered to me my next project. And what was crazy is that I sat next to her, and the synchronicity was so high. And she basically gave me like a $400 session that she usually charges for 2 hours for free. And I still use the notes that she gave me. So I tell that part of the story because I mentioned in my last video that I was getting these messages that just keep coming back. And so since then, in the last year and a half, about 5 different times, one time when I was sitting in a church service, another time when I was on a silent retreat, it's like, it just came out of nowhere, and I had to start writing it down. And it usually happens in a meditation or when I'm really disconnecting from all the noise and just listening to what's out there and listening to the whispers, as I talked about last time, the tugs. And so I want to spend some time today. Number one, I'm going for it. I just started a YouTube channel, and I'm really going with the bias towards action, the trial and error method, leaning into the fear. I'm feeling more and more confident just from the last video, just because I got it out there. I got past that fear of not wanting to be on the camera, not wanting to be out in front and hiding, right? So I'm coming out of that fear, and I'm out here, and I'm really just going to go for a trial and error. So I'm a big fan of innovation, innovative processes, and it's always about bias towards action. Do something, try it again. So I know this for a fact. When I watch this video 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now, I'm like, oh God, it was terrible, right? Because I just know I'm going to get so much better. But here's the deal. I wanted to come on today and talk about what I was talking about with that shift. And this is what I keep getting. And because I'm really starting to tap into this non-linear kind of flow and just really get messages almost in like a psychic intuitive way, I just keep getting this feeling and this message that I have a very official piece of paper here. No, but I wrote it down, and here's the old way of doing things, and here's the new way. And I want to talk about this so that people understand it more, because I got a lot of questions. So number one, the 20th century and the part of where we are now in 2020, there's still a lot of top-down, hierarchical type leadership, right? It's like there's someone at the top, there's all these layers in between, and you got to kind of figure out how to navigate the system for so many things, right? That's what we're all used to. The new version is going to be decentralized and tons of different networks. There's a book that really changed my whole entire perspective on this called Reinventing Organizations by Frederick Laloux. I don't know how to say his last name, but I read that book. They have a workbook that you can get that's super awesome, and it talks about this shifting organizational structure and how there's at the time of the book, which was a few years ago, there were like 20 organizations doing this much more self-driven, self-directed, self-driven, self-managed organization. So the top-down way of being is shifting. The idea that you have to find someone to follow, so there's someone on the outside that you need to follow, that is shifting. The idea that you're conforming to the rules of the group and just kind of following along and trusting the institutions and the groups that things are just going to be fine. We used to be looking for stability and consistency in our institutions, in our jobs, whatever it might have been. And it was a more of a linear and kind of a black and white way of following rules. And now let's be clear. This is super high level, super summarized, simplified. I'm not writing a PhD dissertation here, but this is the feeling that I'm getting. And a lot of times with these intuitive feelings, it's hard to actually explain it in a very logical, factual way. But basically, that's the old way, right? We all know that. That's kind of like the 20th century that a lot of us went through these institutions, these schools. And what's coming and what's moving and what's here is, like I said, decentralized networks, a collaborative groups of like pods and spaces where people are co-creating things, and it's not 42 steps to get to a decision. Things are changing rapidly with technology, and we got to be clear that my oldest child's 9, and he might be driving a car, he might not by the time he's 16. So technology and AI and virtual reality is completely going to change the way things, and it's going to happen much faster than it ever has before. So innovation, disruption, changing the way we do things. Like I was just thinking last night, when was the last time you bought a CD, right? You can come up with these examples, Netflix, like all these things that we couldn't have even predicted 10, 15, 20 years ago. So just imagine what it'll be like in 2030. And instead of just believing institutions and trusting them, now people are starting to question authority, starting to question institutions, the need for flexibility, adaptability, this non-linear way of solving problems. So instead of being in one box of this is the formula we've used for a long time, it's really asking like, what are the creative solutions? How can you think creatively about what is in front of you? How can you think differently about what you're seeing and not just go back to the normal old, same old, same old? And autonomy, people are going to want a lot more autonomy. I talked about in the last video about self-direction, self-managed. People are going to need to understand how to manage their time and do things without specific formulas and people telling them exactly what steps to take. And then the big one that I think is a shift from the old to the new, and this one might be more controversial, but I'm just going to put it out there, is that this kind of traditional notion that God is on the outside, or there's somebody to follow or something on the outside. And what's shifting is that our spiritual nature